Today, we're diving into one of the biggest, most debated political reforms on the table in India: one nation, one election. It's an idea that promises to make things way more efficient. But as we're about to see, it also brings up some really fundamental questions about power, accountability, and the vote. So let's just imagine this for a second. What if, just once every 5 years, you walked into a polling booth and cast your vote for everything at the same time? Your member of parliament for the national government and your representative for your state assembly, all on one day. No more separate state elections sprinkled throughout the year. That, right there, is the core idea we're going to unpack. Officially, this whole concept is called One Nation, One Election, or ONOE for short. The goal is simple: sync up India's massive electoral calendar into one single, predictable event. But, to really understand why this is such a hot topic right now, we actually need to go back in time and see how we ended up with the current system in the first place. All right, first up, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the proposal itself. How would it actually work? And how did we even get to this point? Because what sounds like a brand new, radical idea is really more of a return to how things were done way back in India's early days. Believe it or not, for the first 2 decades after independence, this was totally normal. National and state elections happened at the same time. But then, in the late 1960s, the whole system started to break apart. Some state governments fell, assemblies were dissolved early, and then in 1970, the national parliament itself was dissolved ahead of schedule. This wasn't some grand conspiracy. It was just the messy, sometimes chaotic, and totally unpredictable nature of a parliamentary democracy doing its thing. So how in the world would you get everything back in sync? Well, the proposal has a pretty clever, and some would say controversial, way to do it. First, an appointed date would be set right after a national election. After that, any new state government that's elected would have its term cut short, forced to end at the same time as the national one. But here's the real kicker. If a government collapses midway through its term, the new election isn't for a fresh 5 years. Nope, it's only to serve out the remainder of that original term. That's the key that's supposed to keep all the clocks locked together. Okay, so why go through all this trouble? Let's get into the case for ONE. Supporters say this isn't just about being neat and tidy, it's about fixing some major systemic problems with how India runs its democracy. And they usually start with the cost. And the first argument is a big one: the absolutely staggering cost. Now, while the official government spending is one thing, some estimates put the total cost for just the 2024 national election at 1.35 lakh crore rupees. That's a mind-boggling number. Proponents argue this endless cycle of elections just drains a huge amount of public and private money that could be going towards development instead. And it's not just about money, it's also about time. The length of national elections has just exploded. The 2024 general election stretched on for 43 days. Think about what that means: deploying massive numbers of security forces and government officials for weeks on end, multiple times a year, all across the country. But maybe the most powerful argument you'll hear from supporters is about governance itself. See, whenever an election is called, something called the Model Code of Conduct kicks in. It's basically a set of rules that stops the government from announcing new schemes or projects that could unfairly sway voters. Now, with some part of India almost always in election mode, proponents claim this creates a state of policy paralysis where crucial development work is constantly being put on pause. But that's only one side of the coin. The critiques of this plan are just as strong, and they really challenge these core assumptions. So let's flip over to the other side of the debate and look at some of the potential unintended consequences that have critics so worried. Critics push back hard on this whole idea that cost and policy paralysis are the main villains. They'll point out that what the government actually spends on elections is a tiny, tiny fraction of the national budget. The real problem, they argue, is all the untracked, unaccounted-for money in campaign finance, which ONO does nothing to fix. And that model code of conduct, they say it doesn't stop ongoing work, and the rules only apply in the specific state that's actually voting, not the entire country. And this leads to what could be the biggest, most ironic twist in the whole proposal. Remember that remainder term rule? Okay, picture this. A state government collapses 4 years into its term.
Under this new system, you'd have to hold an election for a new government that would serve for just 1 year. Then everybody would have to go back to the polls again for the regularly scheduled 5-year election. A system designed to have fewer elections could actually end up giving us more of them.
And this all brings us to the really deep part of this whole debate. We're moving beyond just logistics and money now. At its very heart, this is about potentially reshaping the fundamental design of India's democracy and the relationship between the government and the people it governs.
And who better to frame this than the architect of India's constitution himself, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He laid out this exact trade-off perfectly. He argued that a parliamentary system, like the one India has, makes a deliberate choice. It chooses accountability over pure stability. The government has to constantly prove it has the support of the legislature. Pushing towards a rigid, fixed 5-year term fundamentally messes with that balance.
Now, this trade-off has very real consequences for how you and I vote. In our current system, state elections often act as a kind of midterm report card on the national government. Voters can focus on local issues and hold different parties accountable at different levels. But the research suggests that when you vote for everything all at once, the big national issues tend to drown everything else out. One study actually found that voters are 13% more likely to vote for the same party for both the state and the center, which could seriously weaken both federalism and that direct line of accountability. So if the problems of cost and disruption are real, but the big solution comes with these pretty significant risks to the democratic system, it kind of begs the question, right? Is there another way? Is there some kind of middle ground? Well, a lot of experts say yes, and they've put some really interesting ideas out there. Instead of one giant election, how about one nation, 2 elections? You could have all the state elections happen together, but right at the midpoint of the national government's term. That would still cut down on the frequency, but keep that all-important check on power. Other ideas are even simpler. Just reform the rules of the Model Code of Conduct, or go after the high costs at their source by really overhauling campaign finance laws. And that leaves us right here with the final, ultimate question. The push for one nation, one election really forces us all to think about what we value most. Is the administrative ease of a simple, efficient calendar worth fundamentally changing the balance between government stability and voter accountability in the world's largest democracy? That is the question at the very center of this entire debate. Thanks for tuning in.